So F1 is finally back after what feels like a very long winter since Abu Dhabi. The first race happened at Albert Park this weekend. Let's talk about it. So I actually want to start with qualifying and that blistering lap that Lewis Hamilton set in Q3 to get him pole position. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that, does it? As much as it was disheartening to see one car 7/10 faster than the rest of the field, there's nothing quite like watching a guy like Lewis Hamilton drive a near perfect lap. Fantastic. Even made me forget about the halo, which was, who would have thought that was possible? So, onto the race itself, it was a pretty normal, dull sort of start with Lewis Hamilton leading away from Kimi Raikkonen and Sebastian Vettel behind him. However, there was a rather significant position change just after that, with Kevin Magnussen managing to drive around the outside of Max Verstappen at turn 1 to take 4th place for Haas. And Red Bull certainly weren't expecting this. They were probably hoping to challenge the Ferraris for the podium, but the Haas in the middle pretty much got in the way of that, and Verstappen was pushing so hard to get past Magnussen. He was sliding it pretty much out of every turn, and in the end he pushed it too far, with him later saying that he broke something on the car, and this resulted in a very dramatic looking spin at turn 1 where he did a 360 and lost about 3 places to Grosjean, his teammate Ricciardo, and the Renault of Nico Hülkenberg. So then the first round of pit stops started, and Ferrari were the first to pull the trigger, with them bringing Kimi Raikkonen in an attempt to undercut Lewis Hamilton, but Lewis Hamilton's pace in those early stages was just so strong. Raikkonen pretty much had no chance, and Ferrari decided to leave Vettel out and put him on fresher tyres later in the race, and that decision would ultimately prove to be crucial. But the most significant thing that happened in the pit stop stage was the self-implosion of the Haas team, who were looking on the verge of their best race in the team's history by a long shot, and it possibly turned into the worst race in their history as both Magnussen and Grosjean came into the pits, and there was obviously a faulty wheel gun or a hub on the wheel itself. I don't think they've said yet, but the end result was both cars retiring from the race due to faulty pit stops, and it was actually quite gutting to watch a team that has only been in the sport 2 years, and they've really struggled, really. Grosjean had a great first couple races with the team back in 2016, but last year they were only pacey on a few occasions, and to see them bow out of the race like this was actually quite heartbreaking to watch. And we got those images of Grosjean comforting some of his pit crew back in the paddock, and heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time, I think. So Grosjean's stricken car on the outside of turn 2 brought in the virtual safety car, and this virtual safety car basically decided the race, with Sebastian Vettel able to come in the pits during the virtual safety car and emerge just ahead of Lewis Hamilton, which I think pretty much everyone was surprised by, including Lewis himself, who was heard questioning his team over the radio. Toto Wolff said afterwards that they reckoned it was a software glitch. They didn't allow enough time in the programming or something. I don't really know. But the main thing is Vettel came out ahead of Hamilton, and this is where the race started to get interesting. It was pretty dull up until this point, but this is when it started to really pick up. So from this point on, we basically had quite a few little battles throughout the field, with Hamilton chasing down Vettel for the lead. It looked like he was probably going to get him. He was staying very close to the back, and then the team radio message came across. He said to the team, "This is it, I'm going for it." And then he just bowled it wide at turn 9. His first lap, where he was really going to push, went straight off the track, lost 2.5 seconds, and from that point on, it was pretty much Vettel's race from there, which was, it shouldn't have been Vettel's race, but Mercedes decided to save Hamilton's engine due to the ludicrous 3-engine rule this year. So, still an exciting battle to watch, but could have been much better. And then behind them was the battle for third place, which was Kimi Raikkonen and Daniel Ricciardo, who had benefited massively from the two Haas's retiring, put him up into 4th place and gave him a very unexpected chance of a first podium at home, which would have been magnificent to see, but unfortunately it wasn't the case. He got close to Kimi on quite a few occasions, including in the last couple laps where he set the fastest lap of the race, which was encouraging for Red Bull, but they were definitely hoping for at least one car on the podium this weekend, and it just didn't happen. And behind them was Fernando Alonso for McLaren Renault, having a fantastic race for that new partnership. The first time McLaren has scored points in the opening round since 2014, and I think all F1 fans rejoice that McLaren seems to have even a little bit of pace. I know they got extremely lucky, similarly to Vettel with the virtual safety car, and of course the two Haas's retiring, so that realistically it should have been more 8th or 9th probably for Fernando, but circumstances found him up at 5th, and he held off Verstappen for the whole last stint of the race, which, yes, Melbourne is a difficult track to overtake, but there's obviously some inherent pace in the McLaren, and Alonso said afterwards that he thinks this will be McLaren's worst pace of the year, so that's hopefully a good sign of things to come. Rounding out the top 10 behind Alonso and Verstappen was Nico Hülkenberg in 7th place, which was a pretty decent race for the Renault overall. They may have been hoping for a bit higher up. Nico said he got a bit unlucky with the virtual safety car, but still solid pace for them. Probably the 5th fastest car close to McLaren over the weekend. And behind him was Valtteri Bottas, who had a lot of work to do after his pretty hefty qualifying crash in Q3. He started 15th, and he was probably hoping for a little bit higher than 8th, but considering the turbulent air and Melbourne being a difficult place to overtake, it wasn't too bad as far as damage limitation is concerned. After him was Stoffel Van Dorn, double points finish for McLaren. They'll be very happy. And then Carlos Sainz, who had a very interesting and unique problem in that his drink system was faulty, and the end result was he had to continuously keep drinking throughout the race, and he ended up basically feeling like he was going to vomit because of the amount of water sloshing around in his stomach. It was either that or drown in his own car, basically. So for him to still bring that car home ahead of Sergio Perez in 10th was a very good effort. And in terms of retirements, we had Sergei Sorokin, who retired very early on, and it later turned out that he actually got a plastic bag stuck in the brake system of his car, I think, so that ended his race early. Pierre Gasly had a Honda engine failure. And who was the other one? Marcus Ericsson had a power steering failure at about lap 10. So that was pretty much my wrap-up of the Albert Park race. It was a pretty solid way to start the season, certainly better than last year's Australian Grand Prix. I think overall it doesn't bode well for the closeness of the field for the rest of the season, particularly Mercedes, although Vettel won. And yes, he won, but I think he acknowledged that it was quite a lucky win and that Lewis was still the fastest car by a long shot on the day. But hopefully Ferrari and Red Bull can stay close. The battle for the midfield between the likes of Haas, Renault, McLaren and Force India should stay close throughout the rest of the year. And also a shout out to Charles Leclerc for finishing his first race in 13th and ahead of Lance Stroll and the Williams. Well done. So that's pretty much it. And until the next time, I will catch you later.